Everything is inspired by the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Om Ganati Marandasya, Ganangana Sarakya Chaksurin Miritam Yana Tajmai, Siyadve Namaha, Śrī Caitanya Manobhistam, Stapitam Yana Bhutare, Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam. I'd like to talk today about a flash flood of favor. Charu. There's like a war going on in Europe. Gasoline prices have shot up. We're still not out of the pandemic. How in the world can you stand up there and be positive? Well, my answer to that is, this is the time. If everything goes just the way you want it to go, then where's going to be your opportunities for developing your faith? Nobody ever developed a relationship with God by knowing what God was doing. His ways are not our ways. You'll never know what He's up to. In fact, the time it seems like God is least present are the times when God, in fact, is most present. That's how far off the mark we are. It's times like this, challenging times, that we need to be positive. Based on how we react to the dark times, to the challenges, that's going to determine whether we come out of them and when we come out of them. So do I have your permission to give a positive talk today? Thank you. Okay. Actually, this talk doesn't start out with positive news, but I'm going to turn it. I'm going to flip it, okay? You all know that every once in a while, a tragic story comes to us here in Utah about a flash flood in Zions, isn't it? I remember about a decade ago, 11 hikers were in a dry canyon down there. Everything was brown and dried up, hadn't been a drop of water for weeks or months, not a cloud in the sky. All of a sudden, around the corner, came a 20-foot wall of water and washed those 11 hikers away. Nobody could have predicted it. It was due to a rainfall that happened 50 miles away. No warning. Nobody could have seen it coming. So I'm here today to issue you a flash flood warning in a good sense. If you've honored God, whom we call Kṛṣṇa, when there have been negative things in your lives, when things look dark, when there's been heartbreak, loss, and disappointments, and you didn't understand what was going on, if you planted the seeds of goodness and faith and positivity and expectancy in the dark times, I'm here to issue the flash flood warning. That eventually, when those seeds fructify and grow, you're going to experience a flood of God's blessings, a flood of God's favor. It's going to come unpredictably, unexpectedly, without any warning. Why? Because you passed the tests. Of course, the floods I'm talking about are not of water, but they're of overwhelming blessings, overwhelming favor, overwhelming opportunities, and overwhelming healing. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. The kind of flood I'm talking about will take you beyond your normal boundaries. It will supersede what the medical report says. It will supersede your talent, your education, and your experience, and thrust you to a level that you could have never reached on your own. It won't be a drizzle or a little sprinkle. It will be a flood of favor, flood of talent, a flood of ideas, a flood of opportunity. You're about to come into this flash flood where suddenly you meet the right person after all these years. Suddenly you qualify for that new home. Suddenly you're accepted to the college of your choice. You're chosen to play the lead role. Your career takes off. Suddenly you get that mission that you've always been dreaming about. God is going to honor you because you've honored Him, especially in the challenging times. In Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada, our guru, he gave us only one rule. It all boils down to one principle. Always remember Krishna, our God. Never forget Him, even for a single moment. Remind yourself of Him by chanting His holy name, either loudly or slowly, as it may be convenient, but do not forget to chant. To the degree that we line up with Krishna, or God's purposes, to that degree, we'll get the resources to fulfill them. And lining up with His purposes, can I tell you, starts with this little thing inside of our mouth. It's like the rudder of a ship The rudder of a ship's pretty small compared to the ship itself, but the rudder has everything to do with where the ship is going to go and what the future of the ship's going to be. So it says, Ata Śrī Kṛṣṇa Namani Nabhavedramini Sevan Mokahi Jivado. Jiva is the Bengali word for the tongue. You begin serving God with the tongue. We carry it around with us everywhere. We vibrated it. You begin by serving the Lord with your tongue. Krishna is a name for God. It means all attractive. Rama is another name for God. And Hare is the feminine aspect of the Lord, the inspirational aspect. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Caitanya Mahāprabhu, who plundered the storehouse of love of God by distributing the Maha Mantra, the Hare Krishna, everywhere over India. And at that time, Pradita would go to every town and village in the world. He said when the contents of the storehouse in India, the term for a warehouse is go down. So there's a go down that Lord Caitanya established, filled up with love of God. Now most go downs, most warehouses, if you take stuff out, it reduces the stock that's inside, isn't it? But this go down is supernatural, it's special. The more you plunder, you're invited to go in there and just plunder and steal and grab everything you can. And the more you plunder, the more it increases. The more you taste love of God and the more you distribute it and make it available to others, the more the original stock increases. It has that supernatural, uncommon quality. Lord Caitanya Mahāprabhu's birthplace was in Māyāpur, West Bengal, and the Ganges flows right by the property. Every few years the Ganges floods and it inundates everything with its water. So in the same way, analogously speaking, as the Ganges floods the birthplace of Lord Caitanya Mahāprabhu every few years, the inundation of love of God, which also emanates from Bengal, is going to flood the entire world. And this will help everyone, including old men, young men, women, and children. The Krishna consciousness movement of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu is so powerful that it can inundate the entire world and interest all classes of men in love of God. Now think for a moment, will you, with me, on how powerful water really can be. Just 3 or 4 feet of rushing water. I remember a few years ago they had floods in St. George, and you saw cars being just right down the river. Whole houses were collapsing and floating down the river down there. Nothing can stop the force of water. Anything in its way is moved. Now, similarly, you may have difficulties in your life that look insurmountable, immovable, extremely large, obstacles that look impassable, dreams that seem unattainable. But know this, when Kṛṣṇa or God releases a flood of his power, nothing can stop you. That sickness may look big, but when God releases a flood of healing, it doesn't stand a chance. Your opposition may be stronger, more vicious, better financed, better equipped, but when Kṛṣṇa or God opens up the floodgates, there'll be no match for you. You may not have the connections. You may not have the finances. You don't know the right people. But when Kṛṣṇa or God releases a flood of favor, people are going to come out of the woodwork to help you out. You won't have to look for them. Good breaks, good opportunities, the right people, they're going to search you out. So get ready. If you've honored God, especially during the tough times, I'd advise you to buckle your seatbelt, put on your hard hat, and get ready, not for a trickle, not for a stream, not even for a river, but a flood of God's favor, a tidal wave, God's goodness, a tsunami of his increase. Krishna is going to take you to a level you've never been before. It will be unprecedented. You'll go further, faster, quicker than you ever dreamed. It may not look like it right now with all the bad news surrounding us, but remember, I'm putting you tonight under a flash flood warning. Any moment the heavens could open up. Any moment you meet that right person. Any moment God is capable of doing something awesome, something you've never seen before in your life. But the real question lies with us. Will you let this seed take root? Every voice will tell you why it's not right for you, why it could never happen. The things are too bad, Charu. We need to be down and depressed. But I think Kṛṣṇa brought you here tonight for a reason. not just that the papers do, but for a personal, deep, meaningful reason. You had other places of worship that you could have gone to this Sunday. So I believe that Kṛṣṇa brought you here specifically, that he brought you to the right place, the right time, because he wants you to hear this particular message. And now it's up to us to get into agreement with God and say, Kṛṣṇa, this is for me. I'm raising my expectations. I'm shaking off doubt, negativity, disappointment, self-pity, little dreams and little goals. Kṛṣṇa, I will make room in my thinking for a flood of your goodness. About 20 years ago, I think, Vaibhavi was moving a bale of hay. My wife is Vaibhavi. She tripped on the ice and broke her fall with her hand, and a sharp pain shot up her forearm. Went down to the Mountain View Hospital there in Payson. The initial x-ray showed multiple breaks. Showed her wrist bones shattered. The doctor said it would take very, very complicated surgery, multiple surgeries, and the hand would never regain its range of movement, maybe 20%. It would be more like a claw than a hand. And as we were sitting in the room there on the ground floor, and the x-ray was up on the wall, our good friend, Dr. Green, came by. He was at that time the West Salem Stake president, good friend of ours, a cardiologist at the hospital there. And he walked by and he looked and he did a double take. He said, "Bye, what happened?" We told him. He walked in. We chanted Hare Krishna together. And then he said, "Can I do a blessing?" We said, "Absolutely." So we closed the door, and the three of us, Dr. Green put his hands on Bai's wrist and he did a blessing. And then he said, "I think they should take another x-ray." They took another x-ray. They put it up beside the first x-ray on the wall there, and it looked nothing like the first x-ray. The second x-ray showed a simple break, a simple fracture. The doctors came in. They couldn't believe it. They were amazed. Now it appeared to be only broken in one place. Now they said a simple surgery and a cast would restore it 90% back to normal. Well, what was that? That was a flood of healing, flood of restoration. Kṛṣṇa, God, can do what medicine can. Kṛṣṇa knows. When you've got a bad medical report, he knows when you're struggling with your finances. He knows when you're being mistreated. You may not see anything happening at the moment. Let me assure you that Kṛṣṇa not only is aware, but he's at work behind the scenes, already with the solution in mind. We just have to do our job and stay in faith. Keep chanting. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Planting those seeds, and then at the right time, he will release a flood of his favor, a flood of healing, a flood of restoration. He'll not only bring you out, but he'll bring you out better off than you were before. Bai and I had been in the Los Angeles temple for 10 years. In the 80s, when we first got the idea to start a temple in Utah, we were told, even by our co-religionists, that it was impossible. Charu, Utah? Stay in LA. LA is big time. Utah is small time. In Los Angeles in the 80s, they had a t-shirt that said, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you might be in Utah." So we were criticized, we were ridiculed. It looked as if everything and everyone was lined up against our dream. Well, I learned during that period of trials, it doesn't matter who likes you and who doesn't like you. It doesn't matter who approves you or who doesn't approve you. All that matters is that Kṛṣṇa likes you. Kṛṣṇa approves you. Kṛṣṇa accepts you. His favor surrounds you like a shield. Promotion doesn't come from people. Promotion comes from God. Now, if you'll be bold enough to think big, then the God of breakthroughs can release a tidal wave of his goodness, a tsunami of his favor in your life. At times, it's going to seem dark. You may not see how it'll ever work out. Maybe you don't have the funds to pay your bills. Maybe your kids haven't talked to you in 2 years. Maybe people at work are talking behind your back. Maybe your problems seem insurmountable. But if you'll say breakthrough-minded, then Kṛṣṇa promises the light will come bursting in. In the end, Kṛṣṇa not only established this temple in Utah against all of our naysayers and all of our critics, but we also have a second temple in Salt Lake City that opened in 2019. Of all the Kṛṣṇa temples in the United States of America, there's 60 of them. These both stand as the most beautiful of every one of them. Who would have thunk it? Every time I look at either one of these temples, I'm reminded that God is not a God of trickles, not a God of drip drops. He's not a barely squeak by God, but if you're true to him and the dream that he put in your heart, he will flood you, overwhelm you, inundate you with his favor. If you faithfully chant his holy names, he will cause your critics to say, how in the world did Charu and Bai leave Los Angeles and build those temples in Utah of all places? How in the world did he get that management position? How in the world did she get her health back? The experts all said it was impossible, but we have another expert. He says that if you'll honor me, I'll open the vaults of heaven and shower you with blessings and favor. It won't just trickle in. It won't just barely get there. No, like a flood, it will come bursting in. That means suddenly it will change things in your favor. Suddenly you'll catch the break you need. Suddenly your health turns around. Suddenly your problems are resolved. Suddenly a new door opens. Can I tell you that Kṛṣṇa likes to do things suddenly? And when it's dark, don't start complaining. Don't start being negative. Don't send the wrong invitations out. Keep reminding yourself that if you've been faithful and you've kept God first place in your life, it's only a matter of time before the light becomes bursting in. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, and maybe next month. It may not be for another year or two, but sooner or later, when it's your time, suddenly things are going to break in your favor. And when I'm tempted to think that things are not going to work out, it looks impossible, all I have to do is look at this beautiful temple in Spanish Fork and think, Kṛṣṇa, you did it for us once. You did it for us a second time in Salt Lake City. You can do it for us again and again and again. Glory to glory, victory to victory. There's no limit to the flood of God's favor. And when he releases it, it's not a trickle, it's not a stream, it's not a river. It's a flood of healing, a flood of restoration, a flood of promotion. Now, our problem might be that we're thinking too small. Maybe you've settled because you've reached your limit, you think. You think your sick child will never get well, or that you'll never accomplish your dreams. Through my eyes of faith, I see a tidal wave coming your way. You are people who are God-centered. You are people who put God not second or third class, but first class. You are people who give God the best, not the leftovers. And so I'm seeing in your future not a wave of defeat, not a wave of discouragement, not a wave of more and more of the same old, same old. I'm seeing a wave of God's favor, a wave of promotion, a wave of deliverance, a wave of restoration. It's the God of breakthroughs, releasing his favor like a flood, causing you to overcome obstacles that you thought were insurmountable, causing you to accomplish dreams that you thought were impossible. Dare to believe. If you think trickle, guess what? You'll get a trickle. If you think barely get by, then you're just going to barely get by. If you think your problem is too big, then you're going to go through life defeated. But if you learn to think flood, then you're going to experience a flood. If you think overflow, you're going to experience overflow. If you dare to think tidal wave, then God will release a tidal wave of goodness in your life. It says in the Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, 11th verse, Yeya tam mam prapadyate tam sadhaiva mama bhartmana manusya part. As they surrender unto me, Kṛṣṇa says, I reward them accordingly. In the Bible, it says also, according to your faith, it will be done to you. I heard about a little boy one time, a yard sale, he got this lamp and he rubbed it and a genie came out. The genie said, I can give you anything you want, just make a wish. Little boy thought a while and he said, a watermelon? The genie said, say what? Watermelon? Can you give me a watermelon? The genie said, watermelon? I can give you anything you want. You asked for something big. And the boy thought a few more moments and he said, how about a big watermelon? Don't be like him. Don't have a limited, small-minded, narrow vision. How many people, and maybe you're one of them, you feel like you'd be inconveniencing God to ask him for stuff? You don't think you can ask for your dreams to come to fruition because you're bothering God. Rather, you ask God to get by, to just squeak through life. That'll be enough, God. God, I don't expect to get out of this problem. If you'll just help me to endure it, to outlast it. God, I don't expect to ever meet someone and really fall in love. If you'll just help me to cope with this loneliness. That is trickle thinking. When Kṛṣṇa has a flood, you're thinking survive when Kṛṣṇa wants you to abound. You're thinking smaller when Kṛṣṇa wants to open doors that no man can shut. I heard about a young preacher back in the 1950s. He was an itinerant preacher going from town to town in the Midwest, speaking in small auditoriums and small churches. When he went into an auditorium, he would set up all his sound equipment that he carried with him in his car and be ready to go in no time at all. One night, there were a couple hundred people expecting him. That was a big deal for him. He was an up-and-coming young minister, so he arrived a couple hours early to make sure that he had plenty of time to set up. But in the midst of all the excitement, he accidentally locked his keys in the trunk of his car. He knew he couldn't have the big service without that sound equipment, so he tried to pry open the trunk of the car with no success. Some bystanders came by, tried to help him out. They shook it, wiggled it, jimmied it. They got coat hangers and tools. They couldn't open the trunk either. Time was running out, was getting close to the services. They were out in the country. They didn't have time to bring in a locksmith or to tow the car to a repair shop. It looked like the preacher's big evening was about to be ruined. Just when he was preparing to give up, it dawned about him that he had not yet prayed about it. So he announced to the people that he was going to pray and ask God to open up the trunk. They looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Say what? They began to snigger and laugh. You got to be kidding. You can't pray that God open up the trunk of your car. But those doubters didn't bother the preacher. He said, sure I can. It says, you have not because you ask not. He went over, put his hands in the trunk. He said, Lord, I know there's nothing too difficult for you. You know I need this sound equipment for the meeting tonight. So I'm asking you to somehow, some way, help me open this trunk. He began to shake and rattle it even more vigorously than before. And nothing happened. It wouldn't open. He turned, and as he started to walk away, the laughter and the snickering grew a bit louder. All of a sudden, they heard this pop! They turned around, and the trunk had popped open, and in slow motion, the trunk lid began to rise up towards the heavens, just as if Kṛṣṇa was saying to them, I told you I'd do it. I'm the God of the breakthrough. The people helping him nearly passed out. From then on, they did anything the preacher asked. Yes, sir. No, sir. Is there anything else I can? Whatever you say, sir. So you may not need a trunk to open today, but maybe the doctors have told you that there's nothing more they can do. Maybe it's a sickness trying to pull you down. Well, get ready for the God of breakthroughs to show up. Maybe it's a relationship that needs to be restored. A family member is making bad decisions. Life is off course. Start declaring the God of the breakthrough is turning it around. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Or maybe your dreams just look too big, like it's not possible. Well, don't ever rule out the God of the breakthrough. Like a flood, his favor can overtake you. I'm asking you to be breakthrough-minded. You may be accepting things in your life that are far less than what Kṛṣṇa wants for you. It's been so long since you've seen the changes. But this is a new day. New seeds are taking root in your heart. The good news is that God of the breakthrough is about to visit your house, not with a trickle, not with a stream. Get ready for a flood of God's favor, a tidal wave of his goodness. Release your faith in a greater, more expansive way. If you don't pray for the trunk to open, it won't. Dare to believe. Kṛṣṇa wants to give you something to talk about. He wants you to have stories to tell. It's easy to think, and I know some of you out there are saying, this is not for me. I don't see anything different happening. There's too much against us. It's too dark. It's too foreboding. I tried it before and it didn't work out. I've been through too much. Okay, well, that negative thinking is going to stop the flood in your case. I'll tell you that. Kṛṣṇa works where there's an attitude of faith. Seeds grow where there's fertile, well-watered ground. When you believe, all things are possible. The enemy cannot stop this flood. The enemy doesn't have that power. Other people cannot stop it. The only one that can stop it is you. You control your own destiny. Kṛṣṇa is for you. The enemy is against you. Now, you get to cast the deciding vote. We're asking you tonight to take the limits off of God. He wants to do something new, something abundant in your life. The real battle is taking place right up here in your thought life. Some of your thoughts will say, it's not going to happen. You're too old. You've made too many mistakes. You'll never get well. You'll never accomplish your dreams. The other thoughts are going to say, no, this is the day that you will see the favor of God profusely abound. God has floods of blessing in your future, tidal waves of increase and joy and healing and mercy. I can tell you firsthand, by Bobby and I, we've experienced this flood of Kṛṣṇa's favor. Kṛṣṇa has overwhelmed us with his goodness. I'm not bragging on us. I'm bragging on Kṛṣṇa there. Kṛṣṇa has taken us beyond our education, beyond our talent, beyond our training. He's unleashed his abundance, his wisdom, and his favor in our lives. And for this to happen, you have to keep Kṛṣṇa or God first place in your life, not second or third or fifth or sixth. Second thing is learn to take the limits off of him. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Our prayer for you this afternoon is the eyes of your understanding would be flooded with light, that you would know how much Kṛṣṇa or God loves you, how much he is for you, and what an amazing future that he has in store. My prayer is that faith will fill your hearts, that you will raise your level of expectancy, and that you will see Kṛṣṇa's or God's goodness like never before. We're announcing today that you're all under a flash flood warning. You need to get ready. You're about to see the favor of God profusely abound in your life. Because you've honored him, chanted his holy names, and kept him first place, because you've been faithful, Kṛṣṇa is shifting things in your favor. All you have to do is wake up every morning and say, Lord, thank you for this flood of favor that's coming into my life, and then go out every day expecting it. If you do that, I believe you're going to see God's goodness overwhelm you. I believe you're coming into floods of favor, floods of healing, floods of wisdom, floods of good grace, floods of mercy. Get ready for it. It's headed your way in this life. And in the next life, you're headed back to home, back to Godhead. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.